This is partially a sequel to my last video about asking for feedback as a Dungeon Master, but it's a little bit more than that as well. This is also a sequel to my Dirty Little Trick video. If you didn't watch that video, the premise is that you should make a deliberate, small mistake early in your first game, especially if you're running for new players. Because it reminds your players, and you, that you are all human beings who will make mistakes, and that's okay. However, I did realize there's more to say on that subject, so we're going to get into that today. The inspiration for this video came from this tweet from Dragna Carta earlier this year. We need to normalize letting DMs admit to their players when they've screwed up. I accidentally made this magic sword too powerful, / this boss fight too easy, / this mystery too hard. Do you mind if we nerf it, / take 2 minutes to rebalance, / retcon in a clue? I wanted to share that tweet and make this video, because there's a real chance that if you want to become a DM, you are intimidated by the idea that you have to be perfect. And this literally might be the first time you've heard somebody say that it's okay to make mistakes as a Dungeon Master. Because quite frankly, the D&D culture mythologizes the role of the DM, which is understandable given the amount of power and responsibility the DM has for the story, but we also mythologize the expectations we have toward DMs. The Matt Mercer effect, which I've discussed before, is just the latest version of that, where new players expect their Dungeon Masters to put the same energy into the same aspects of D&D that Matt Mercer does on Critical Role, and expect their DMs to be just as entertaining and just as skilled. But that's just one form this takes. It's the most modern form. And if you watch this channel and you share that feeling, that fear, that you can't admit to mistakes when you are a Dungeon Master, actual play shows are likely a major contributing factor. One problem that has so often plagued people who want to get into Dungeons & Dragons is just trying to figure out how the game worked. Either DMs learned how to be a Dungeon Master from seeing somebody else in action, or they just picked the books up, taught themselves, and went in cold. Occasionally, you could drop into a gaming store or a convention and see a game in progress. Maybe you could join a home game for a couple of sessions. But besides being at a session in person, there were not a lot of other visible examples of the game in action. And then came the rise of actual play. These days, we have hundreds, probably thousands of D&D actual play shows alone. And new players and new DMs can watch these shows and learn how the game actually plays. This reduces the barrier to entry of D&D dramatically. But in the case of admitting mistakes, here the visibility of actual play D&D actually works against us, because the most successful actual play shows tend to have the most impressive Dungeon Masters. And this sets an idea in our heads that we have to excel in the same ways as those DMs. And that's simply not true. Especially when you're just starting out. It's just not true. This is like the other side of the Matt Mercer effect. Instead of the players having expectations for how the DM will run the game, which can be just solved with healthy communication, this form, I think, is much more insidious, because it's a way that we as DMs hold ourselves to an unfair standard. Because new DMs see these other examples, and they begin to doubt their own abilities before they've even started playing. And this discourages them from starting their campaign, or if they do run a game, it can hold back their fun while they play. This may seem funny coming from me, considering that I make videos every other week breaking down the lessons we can learn from episodes of Critical Role. But this actually feeds into why I make those videos. I want to demystify some of the most popular, most successful Dungeon Masters of our era. Because the more we can talk about how these Dungeon Masters do what it is they're doing so well, the more you can see that actually being a Dungeon Master is not that scary. So this step, not holding yourself to such a high standard, is the first battle toward making you comfortable with the fact that you're going to make mistakes as a Dungeon Master. Not only should your friends not expect you to run a game in the same style as Matt Mercer or Bria Iyengar, but you shouldn't put that weight on your shoulders either. There is another wrinkle to viewing DMs through the lens of actual play shows, because the truth is, sometimes those DMs do make mistakes. Either they'll do something that just doesn't land as well as they would have hoped, or they'll forget something important, or they'll create an encounter or an NPC that just doesn't land how it should. And when that happens, those players can get kind of merciless, no pun intended.
As you guys begin to approach the gate, you hear a small horn just kind of give off this arrival notification, this but like deeper and much cooler sounding. Because I'm not a because I'm not a war horn.
And I know that for some people who are nervous about running their own games of D&D, they'll see a clip like that And apologies for showing it to you, by the way. I did not mean to put this idea in your head. But they'll get nervous that their players will have the same reaction to their mistakes. And I can't 100% reassure you that this can't happen at any table besides an actual play table. That's probably not true. It can. But the folks on Critical Role have been friends for 10 years, and this is part of how their friendship manifests. They joke around and they give each other a hard time. That does happen in D&D games, of course. It can happen, but it depends on who you invite and what dynamic you have with them. There are also, I feel like, more jokes at the expense of these successful DMs because they are so proficient at so many aspects of the game. The players on Critical Role celebrate Matt's incredible sound effects, but they also have come to expect them at this point. And so when one of them doesn't quite land, they'll laugh about it with him. This is actually similar to some discussions I saw around the time that Campaign 2 started. I saw that some players online wanted to do voices at their table, but they felt discouraged from doing it when they watched Critical Role and they saw that the players were giving Taliesin a hard time about his inconsistent Irish accent. The players who were worried about this, who were not professional voice actors, didn't think that they would be able to handle it if that happened to them while they were playing D&D. And that's a really fair point. But I also think we need to remember the counterpoint. I don't think Taliesin would have been the butt of those jokes if he wasn't a professional voice actor. They know that he's capable of doing incredible accents, and they're kind of teasing him as fellow colleagues about the fact that this particular accent he just wasn't able to do consistently. That might be a small comfort, but it's just important to know that it's possible that some friends will tease you, but some friends will not. And listen, you are well within your rights to, when somebody teases you about something you're doing at a D&D table, just ask them to stop. Or, stop playing with them if they don't stop. You do not have to play D&D with people who make you feel bad about your style and the things you enjoy. Now, while we're talking about the visibility of these dungeon masters, it is worth pointing out that since they stream their games on Twitch and YouTube, there are comments. If you've ever seen these comments, you will see some strong opinions about what dungeon masters should or should not do. God forbid one of these DMs forgets a rule or just decides not to use it in the way that these commenters feel is correct. But here's the good news. You don't have to play with any of those people either. Only invite the people you want to play with. You will get better over time about feeling out the terrain and determining whether somebody is going to be someone you're going to enjoy playing with. Eventually you'll be able to tell that before you start playing, before you even invite them to play. But this is a learned skill and it takes a while to get it right. But again, if somebody isn't fun to play D&D with, don't play with them. Life's too short and there are always more players out there for them and for you. That's not to say that you shouldn't know the rules or there's no value to learning the rules. You can. You totally can. There are some rules that are really important to know, I think, and here's a whole video about that. But you don't have to know all the rules to run a great game of D&D. But even if you're like me and you've been playing 5th edition ever since it came out 8 years ago, and you've watched hundreds of hours of actual play shows, and you've run multiple campaigns, you can still make mistakes. That's normal. And it's not a big deal. But okay, let's get to the point of the video. You made a mistake at the table. Maybe you catch it immediately, maybe you don't realize it until much later. How do we admit our mistakes? This is where we go back to that tweet from Dragna Carta. We need to normalize letting DMs admit to their players when they've screwed up. I accidentally made this magic sword too powerful. Do you mind if we nerf it? I accidentally made this boss fight too easy. Do you mind if we take 2 minutes to rebalance? I accidentally made this mystery too hard. Do you mind if we retcon a clue? I don't have a magic bullet, some secret to admitting a mistake, because there should not be any more to it than that. Now, there are a few things that you should consider when admitting your mistake. First, it is your responsibility to own up to it as quickly as possible. I recently heard an account from a DM who realized they had crossed one of their players' lines or veils, I don't remember, but something that they had established in session 0 that they did not want to happen at the table. Now, the DM did not realize they'd done it until afterward, and they certainly did not do that on purpose. So they were basically wondering when and how to bring it up and resolve it. And I understand this. Believe me, I do exactly the same thing with, honestly, many aspects of my life. I don't want to get into situations where I have to admit my mistakes. But you do still want to address the mistake as soon as possible. Because if you're aware of the mistake, or you're feeling the effects of it, the other players probably are too. Maybe not all of them, but you won't know until you say something. Thankfully, not every mistake has the same impact as crossing somebody's lines or veils, but it is still really important to get out in front of a mistake as quickly as possible. Second, it can be very easy to put the emphasis in the wrong place. I talked about it last time, but you don't want to make your players feel like they have to give you the answer that you want. For example, you don't want to say, oh, I guess I forgot the way that spell/magic item works. Is everyone okay with what happened? To quote Mike Shea from the Sly Flourish channel, if you're in an X card situation, you don't want to put someone in a position where they have to say no again. This isn't just true of lines and veils. This can be true of any mistake you make across the board. Don't ask, are you okay with what just happened? You know they might not be. That's why we're calling this a mistake and not a shenanigan. I talked in my last video about some really important life advice that also rings true in D&D. When you're asking a question, you have to be ready to get any answer. But sometimes we phrase questions in a way that hints at the right answer, as far as we're concerned. And that's unfair to our players, because it puts them in a position where you are asking them to uphold the status quo so far, and making it seem like you hope they don't have a problem with that. So instead, in this case, when you know you've made a mistake, own up to it. Admit that it is a mistake that you have made and you need to fix it, and instead put the emphasis on how. You can present a possible solution and see if they think that's fair. Or if you're not sure how to course correct, you can say that instead. Okay, I've realized it was a mistake to let you cast the spell this way, but I don't want to undo or redo the last 5 rounds of combat. Does anybody have an idea for how we can adjust this going forward so that this encounter is more fun? That's just one possible example, but I do want you to keep that phrasing in your mind. You want this game to be as fun as possible for everyone involved. If you've realized that you've made a mistake but you don't say anything, it's probably all you're going to be thinking about. And if the mistake involves somebody else, it's probably all they're thinking about too. They may not exactly realize what has happened, they may not think of it as a mistake on your part, but they'll feel something. So it is just so much better to be candid with your players and get this issue off your chest right away. And if you're looking for ways to keep yourself honest at the game table, one way to do that is to make sure that all of your materials are in one place and are very easy to access at any time. And that brings us to today's sponsor, World Anvil. World Anvil is an online tool that you can use to assemble your notes, craft your campaign setting, track your timelines linked with your maps, and publish articles for you and your players. It's the easiest way to get everybody on the same page for your game. I love the feeling of creating a campaign world, but sometimes I can be daunted by all the possible decisions I can make. But World Anvil has randomizer tools that you can use as inspiration when crafting your setting. And that is just one of the many very cool tools that World Anvil has at their disposal. You can sign up for World Anvil for free, or you can use the code SUPERGEEK to save 40% off of any annual subscription. Thank you so much to World Anvil for sponsoring this video. Thank you so much for watching. We've been really introspective this month with some of our videos, and I hope you are receiving them well. I hope that these are working and that they are making you think about the game in interesting ways. If you want to support the channel, there are a few ways you can do that. You can subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about new videos as soon as they come out. You can sign up for my Patreon and help make donations that make this channel better. You can join my Discord and hang out with other people who watch the channel and talk about D&D and RPGs and actual play shows and putting together games. It's a really wonderful community. And you can join my newsletter and get updates about the cool stuff I've got going on. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, play fair and have fun. Why do all the motorcycles drive down our road? Because we're on a busy road in a bad neighborhood. Ugh, I don't like it here.